Hi, I'm Patti.
And I'm Jackie, and together we are Grow Live, where we answer your garden questions one gardener at a time, one question at a time, helping you create a healthy planet.
That's right, Jackie. Well, I'm super excited about this week. Although our weather here in eastern Montana has been extremely challenging, and I'm like a week behind in planting because planting windows are very, very tiny. And we went from 37 degrees at night, and I'm waiting for it to get warm enough to plant the tomatoes and peppers, to 103 degrees 2 days ago. And I'm like, whoa, what happened to spring here? So it's been hugely challenging for people in eastern Montana. And then, of course, if you know anything about eastern Montana, we have the wind. And so, yes, the wind has been even more challenging. But so I'm dressed a little casual today because I was right out in the garden and just walked in here. So, but today we are talking about one of my favorite subjects, companion planting, and super excited about that. So let me get a share going here so that you can see some pictures that I've thrown together for you. Show 19. Hard to believe, huh? Jackie doesn't think so, but I still think so. We are helping people grow a healthier world, and today we're starting with companion planting. My take on companion planting, it's more of polyplanting. Like if I'm going to plant broccoli or kale, I am pairing certain plants with it to help it deal with flea beetles and cabbage moss, so that I don't have those worms in all of that family of broccoli and cauliflower and all those things. So that's what's in my mind when we talk about companion planting. It's not which flower looks good with which vegetable plant, right? I'm thinking about what's really going to happen here later in summer. So this is an example, and we call it in regenerative ag, they call it planting green, right? So I have beets growing and borage in this particular picture, and then I stuck in some spring onions, right? So then I planted into a green growing bed and made polyculture or interplanted with beets, onions, and borage. And the onions are going to come right out, because onions aren't that good a friend from reading the garden books and stuff and companion websites and things. They're not that grand a friend to a lot of plants. So they're not going to stay in there very long because spring onions will be up and ready to eat quickly. Here's another view of that planting. And I think there's some peas in there, looks like in foreground there too. So when I plant more than just one thing. So in the strawberries, I have, this is in a high tunnel, and they're underplanted underneath cucumbers. So they're a ground cover for the cucumbers, and they're a preannual or a biannual, where I'm going to be able to keep them going by putting new runners into the bed underneath cucumbers. And
are those the cucumbers coming up in front in that picture, or are those sunflowers?
That's borage, and it looks like a cucumber coming up. So borage is one of our farmscaping plants, where it's got lots of nectar, brings in incredible amounts of beneficial insects, blooms all summer. The bees just love it, and it's crazy good plant. But one of those.
Where are the cucumbers?
The cucumbers aren't in this picture. They would be over in here. Planted one cucumber about every 18 inches or 16 inches. And then the strawberries are underneath them. The borage is going to get thinned out, right? Because one plant is all I need in this picture instead of all those little ones. So I leave the little ones in for a little while because they're helping feed the soil microbes with the root exudates and stuff while they're growing. And same way with sunflowers, stuff like that comes up and you got too many of them. I leave them for a little while because they're helping build my microbe numbers up in the soil, and then I pluck out what I don't want. Decide which plant I'm going to keep, which one goes. So I would only leave one borage plant in this for the get-go, and it's on the end of the border of the cucumbers because it gets up 2.5 foot tall. So I wouldn't want that probably right underneath the cucumbers, but on the ends of the beds it works really good. Or the edges work really good. So kale is another plant that I just grow a lot of and just love. And so it's also got lots of pests, right? So I like to interplant several things with that. This I undersowed carrots when I planted the kale, and now they're up and going good. And they're just going to make a kind of a ground canopy underneath there. And they're also another beneficial plant that does a lot of really good stuff. Now I'll go ahead and sneak in some marigolds into a planting like this, so that when the cabbage moths get going, they will get so confused by the scent of the carrots and the marigolds that they won't be laying eggs into the kale. These are beets that are undersowed underneath the tomatoes or cucumbers. In this bed, it's tomatoes, but it could be under cucumbers too. In where we're going to be trellising them, right? We're trellising these plants into a high tunnel. So then we're making all these layers. It's kind of like a permaculture technique of layering. So you got your tomato up high, then your cucumber, or not your cucumber, but your beets. And then underneath that, I put sweet alyssum. I put sweet alyssum in almost everything.
Can you have cucumbers with tomatoes? Mike asked me that yesterday.
Well, they both use the same nutrients. So, I think they can, but they're also depleting your bed of those same nutrients at the same time. And they're both heavy feeders. And cucumbers want a lot of water. And tomatoes will take on a lot of water, but I try to keep them separate from the water usage and easier to pick, right, than not doing it. This is an experiment here of planting kale and broccoli right into already planted hairy vetch. And from all of my research, I should have planted the broccoli and kale and then planted the hairy vetch. But this is in a bed that I've been letting kind of go for the pollinators. It's full of borage and hairy vetch. And the pollinators rely on it. They know it's there. They come every single year. So it's a major food source. And so I thought, well, I'll just try this and see how it goes. If it looks like the kale and the broccoli can't get enough nutrients, then I'll go ahead and sheet mulch some of that with cardboard and some hay or wood chips on top of that to try to give more nutrients back to that kale plant than to let the vetch take it all. But the vetch is fixing nitrogen, so if I could go in there and cut that vetch right back or pull it up, all of which is going to release nitrogen to the other plants around it. So we'll see. It's an experiment. I love trailing nasturtiums, and they do tremendous amounts of beneficials. And if you've missed our beneficial insects and pollinating show, watch that on our YouTube channel. And so you'll know that we use it for lots of different reasons if you watch that little video. But in this planting, it's interseeded there with kale, and that's one plant of nasturtium. So with the trailing nasturtium, you get a lot of bang for your buck. You get lots of flowers, lots of vegetation out of one plant. And so that one plant's just needing the amount of nutrients and water as one plant. And a lot of other nasturtiums are tiny. They only get maybe a foot in diameter. And so that's why I really like these trailing ones. Calengia and sweet alyssum, I use those for underplantings under a lot of stuff. For sure, in a greenhouse here, we'd put them underneath the tomatoes. But the calengia, I've got that underneath the broccoli beds right now, and cauliflower, and trying to put out lots more scent to confuse those cabbage moths is the theory.
Patti, sweet alyssum is an annual, right? So you have to plant that every year. Do you buy that in starts or? No,
I buy the seed, and I will grow 3 to 4 flats of it. And it's super cheap. It's the cheapest thing that I do. And so I just get a bag of seeds that, I don't know what they are, half an ounce or whatever, but they're tiny. So that bag will last me several years. But then I will plant it into and transplant them into plugs. So then I can put them in wherever I want. I just put them into borders or put them into these underplantings or whatever. So this particular bed is kale and broccoli Brussels sprouts this year. And so I snuck in poppies which were plugs, wherever in between the plants, because those leaves are going to get huge right in that bed. But then the poppy will be able to come up in between of them, have a flower canopy up above the broccoli and cauliflower. That's the goal. And that definitely will confuse those cabbage moths where they won't even know where to lay their egg. And so if they lay on a non-target plant, then their babies don't survive. So it's super cool. Great way to do it. And then underneath of it's got calengia and cilantro, but cilantro is going to come out, right? Because it's going to be done for the season. And then I'd probably stick in some French marigolds underneath there. Here's an overview looking down onto the small planter that I use for growing greens spring. It's in the high tunnel. And so that plant's probably got, I don't know, 8 different plants growing in there, from beets to, that's a Chinese cabbage in there, had arugula, cilantro, sprouting broccoli, and a couple different kinds of kale in there. And so as those arugulas and cilantro come out, then I added in marigolds, or I think I even added in possibly some rosemary. Rosemary will work the same way. And I think next year I'll probably start a flat of rosemary. Have to start it super early in the winter to get it to go. Here's another overview looking down on top of the tomato bed. So we've got a row of beets in the middle of the tomatoes, which they're going to come out before those tomatoes get too big, and just we'll pull them out as needed. And then tomatoes are going to be growing on strings, right, and get up big and tall. And then sneaking in the sweet alyssum and different stuff around them.
Is this year or a different year?
This is this year. This is right now. Yep. Both those beds were right now.
But this is all in the greenhouse then?
This is a high tunnel.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't taken the picture of the kale and carrots was in a greenhouse. So that's why those carrots are so progressed. They're in a greenhouse of ideal growing conditions and stuff. But this is a high tunnel right here in my backyard. So that's give you some ideas. Here's just some pictures to kind of really get you thinking. And then we're going to stop sharing. And then we can visit some more and see, what do you think?
Were those last pictures your place? Holy cow, that was a lot of food.
That is the ReGenerative garden that I've helped consult on. And it's right outside of town here. Yeah, she does a phenomenal job, unbelievable stuff. And yeah, you got some questions?
I asked all mine, sorry.
Oh, you already asked
I'm not good at waiting. I'm like, wait, I have to ask all the pictures there.
Well, I know a lot of people want to pick up a book, and a lot of people read a book. And I've read a lot of books on companion planting, you know, because the researchers all say, oh no, this is all just gardener talk and stuff. But then, you know, that's several years ago, and so now there's a lot of books out there on companion planting. There actually is research on it now, and so this is my favorite book. And it is by a master gardener, Sally Jean Cunningham. So it's a fantastic book, and will really help you get going and some ideas on do's and don'ts and different things. So super good. So let's just have a conversation. What do you got, Lori? Have you got some ideas?
I was wondering, I planted some cucumbers in my greenhouse in one bed. Mm-hmm. And your idea of the strawberries and the cucumbers, would strawberries do well in a greenhouse? Or would it be, yeah? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have them in the greenhouse over at the Sleeping Buffalo and in the high tunnel. And
okay. Yeah,
they've already performed in the greenhouse. They've already ate the strawberries. And in the high tunnel, they're just setting berries really good right now.
Wow.
So, yeah, and so if you want a lot of strawberries, right, you'd put them in the greenhouse, high tunnel, and out in the growing beds, and you'd have them for quite a while.
Cool.
Yeah, super good.
Tried them yet? I mean,
pretty easy to control, you know, where that you just put the runners where you want them to, and take out what you don't want.
mm-hmm.
So It's pretty good because pretty controlled environment and pretty small beds. You know, they're just, these particular beds I've got are probably a little, no, not much more, over 2 foot. A lot of growers would use a 30-inch bed, but easy to manage.
Yeah, well, the greenhouse, my bed's in there, not too big either, but if they do well with cucumbers, then that's what I could do with that bed this year. I got some.
Yeah. And I haven't had any cucumber pests. You know, some people have beetles that get in them and cause all kinds of havoc, but I have not had any of those problems. But, you know, I have a lot of polyculture going on and lots of beneficial plants and beneficial insects. And so, yeah, I don't have any problems with those sort of things. But
Okay.
The French marigolds work great for multiple reasons. You know, my grandmother and mother always had marigolds at the end of every row and sometimes in between plantings and stuff. And so we never knew why when I was a kid or even as a younger adult. We didn't know why, you know, it was just something that we did and everybody did it, you know. And so then they've done a lot more research. And so French marigolds can control nematodes, bad nematodes, not good nematodes, but bad nematodes. And so they're really good and they're short, you know, so they get maybe max 10, 12 inches tall. Once in a while, I'll get one to get up 16 inches tall, but still very doable for underplanting underneath, you know, other plants. Supposedly they can control some beetles in the ground from what they're emitting, because they emit a lot of chemicals. There are a lot of chemicals in marigolds, both the root, the flowers, and the petals and the leaves, all got a lot of different chemicals in them. And so, yeah, I think they just really can really help you in a lot of ways. So I'm kind of hoping that they can keep the flea beetle numbers in check.
Okay. And if I planted seeds, I don't have any seeds yet for marigolds, but if
Yeah, you can start them. They're super fast. And in this kind of growing climate, they're going to come up very quick.
Yeah.
And get going. Yeah, I had been saving seed out of them. And so I had some that didn't germinate well. So I had to replant. And so those are just now a couple inches tall. So Janice wants to know what controls slugs. So that's going to be part of we're going to talk about weeds next week. And so we was going to talk about that with that, but I'm doing an experiment this year. So I'm constantly experimenting, but a friend of mine gave me a lot of wool to compost because the wool prices are horrendous in the United States. And hers had some cockaburs or something in them so that they weren't very marketable. And so she just gave it to me to compost. And then I got to reading up on it and I'm like, wow, it sounds like they're making wool pellets for slug bait. Well, it's actually slug control because the slugs don't like the wool at all. So there's a pellet that you can buy that's made out of wool. I just put wool around the plants, especially the cabbages, right? That's where my biggest problem with slugs is on the cabbages. So I put the wool all around the area where the cabbages leaves are going to be coming out and surrounding that area because, man, last year I was in a losing battle with the slugs and the cabbages. All the other plants, I didn't have any problems, were that you could I put in like when the zucchini start producing, I'll take a bigger zucchini and cut it long ways and quarter it. So it got 4 big pieces. Lay it in the ground, on top of the ground where the slugs are wanting to be habitating onto whatever it is, cabbages or whatever. And they will be loaded up on that zucchini. And then I dunk them in water. So there's a couple things that can't swim, slugs and ticks. So both good that they can't swim. So dunk them in some water and that will help start controlling them. Now, that takes a lot of religious work because they just keep coming. You know, if you got a lot of mulch in your garden, then they're probably going to keep on coming because they're part of nature's way of breaking down that mulch.
You just need ducks.
Ducks work great. Yes. There's a wonderful little video on YouTube of this duck herder I think they're over in India, and they're hired to clean this grapevines. And so there's hundreds of ducks. And they're these ones that are tall and they stand up straight. Really cool looking. And they waddle the whole herd of them waddles across the road and out into the grapevines. It's just hysterical. But they are by far the best slug controller is ducks. But anyhow, that's the slug story. I constantly trying to find more and more thorough research on slugs. I did find a lady over in Europe that sounds like she's extremely educated in it, but I've only caught one podcast with her, and so it's been hard to get her research.
I do notice that if I leave a bucket or something in the garden, there's slugs underneath the bucket when I pick it up and on the ground. So that's the same thing that the zucchini would be doing. You would get, a big zucchini and put it cut side down, I would think.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, the thing about the zucchini is you can pick it up and dunk it in water really quick and easy. And so, yeah, lids of for buckets, anything that is damp and cool and dark, that's what they love. That's what they're going to go to and gravitate to. And so you could kind of bait them by watering, get a low spot in your garden, water it, and put that as the slug trap, right? Because they're going to gravitate to that. If you dry out the rest of the garden for a day or two, they're going to all be over there where their moisture is because they've got to have it. They can't live without it. So, all right.
Then if you have mulch, it's all under. You don't have a dry place if you have mulch.
Exactly. Yep. But you can make wetter places than others. But yeah, it's starting to be where I think I'm into my 10 year of dealing with slugs. It's just a continually learning.
Right.
But they're part of nature, and they do some pretty cool things. I actually do think they eat flea beetle eggs. They do eat beetle eggs. And so they break down compost. They're one of the first digesters. So anyhow, yeah. What else we got? Have we got any other questions? I was going to show you this stuff. This is the dandelion juice extract. This is the first one I made when we made the show about it a few weeks ago. And then this is the jar that I made the day I made the show. And so you can see it's starting to get the black syrup down in the bottom and seems to be working well. I'm going to start using some of it here shortly. Here's some of the sweet alyssum. Make sure people know about sweet alyssum, that it's just incredible of giving nectar for the beneficial wasp and predatory insects. And so it has tiny, tiny flowers. And as it starts getting, these are buds out here on the edge, right? That's a bud. I'm going to pick that off. So then now the plant's thinking, at first it thought, well, I've got a flower out there. If I have a flower out there, then I'll be able to get some seeds out there and reproduce. That's the annuals plant. That's its goal in life, is to reproduce. So if I let that do that, this plant will stay this little spindly. But if I pinch those off, it will get 3, 4, 5 times bigger in that first pinching. Then I come through in the second pinching, I just take a pair of scissors and give them a haircut everywhere. And then this one little spindly plant will turn into a mound that will be like this, a good 12 inches or longer and good 6 inches tall by giving them those 2 haircuts. And so I know a lot of gardeners that are like, oh my gosh, you're going to cut the bloom off? I'm like, yes. Even in pre-bud, cut the bloom off, and it's going to shock the plant into, this plant thinks, oh, I wasn't able to reproduce. I must need to have a lot more babies. And it has a lot more babies. When you do it the second time, it's like, oh my gosh, there's an alarming state. It's like, well, I need to put out hundreds of flowers. And so they do. And it's just incredible. So I plant them about every 5 to 6 inches apart and give them these haircuts. And pretty soon it just looks like a mound and they're sharing space with them. They're just super nice.
So when you cut them the second time, you cut them back to?
I just cut off about 1 or 2 inches.
Okay.
Off everywhere. And then they're going to come back in this huge amount. If you don't give up that first haircut, it's going to stay a pretty spindly plant.
Okay.
And it will start setting seed really fast. That first flower will start setting seed while the more flowers are coming out. That it, as soon as it starts setting seed, it's like, I got my job done. I can relax and I don't have to do all this extra work. But when you give it that haircut, it's going to go to work and really produce flowers and smell fantastic too. So, all right. Well, I am sure you guys got things to do on Saturday morning, and I know I've got to go plant some pumpkin seeds. And I use the pumpkins for some of my weed control that we're going to talk about next week on managing weeds. So until then, let's grow healthy and have good luck. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Pat.
You're welcome. Hey, thanks for watching the show today. We really appreciate it. We need help growing our channel so that we can get to more people. We're all about education, and the more education we can give and get together, the better off we're going to be in growing healthy gardens and more nutrient-dense food. So, you know the YouTube deal, subscribe, like, all that stuff. So, but you can really help yourself by becoming a guest. And all you got to do is join us on Patreon. And I think it's at the $20 level. Who cannot afford that? So I hope you can. And let's grow healthy.